I overheard Mom on the phone. She told someone I wasn't your son. Whenever you're away, Mom hits Grandma and yells at her to die. I also heard her say she switched the drugs, and the new one will kill Grandma in 6 months. I don't want Grandma to die, Dad. I also want to be your son.
Hello? My name's Theodore, and I'll be getting married to my beautiful wife in 2 weeks. Evelyn is the woman I'd always dreamt of. I met her quite late at age 48, but I'm willing to have a great life with her. Sometimes, I wish I had met her earlier. My life would have been way better. I was married before. No, my ex-wife didn't die. She didn't leave me either. I divorced her. We were married 10 whole years before I got to know her true self. I still wonder how I could stupidly trust her. My ex-wife, Catherine, was 25 when I first met her. She was a newly employed worker at my dad's company, which I was managing at the time. Being new, she had a lot to learn. But she was slow, and that annoyed the other workers. I didn't know her until I met her crying to herself in the printing room one day. I'd approached her to ask what the matter was, but she flew into my arms and wept loudly. I felt pity for the poor lady and comforted her without a word. After she stopped crying, she finally explained what the issue was. According to her, she was feeling like a burden to the others. Nothing she did was good enough. She was always making mistakes.
I feel like a failure. I want to quit. I just want to quit and stop living.
I felt so much pity for her. I comforted her and managed to talk her out of her bad thoughts. I promised to help her and asked her to come straight to me if she had any problems. She thanked me in tears and I left afterward. Starting from the next day, she began coming to me. I would patiently explain whatever was unclear, and she soon began getting better at her work. In a week and few days, she'd gotten a grasp of everything and didn't need help anymore. She was so thankful to me and requested to treat me to dinner one day. Of course, I agreed. After work, we went to a fancy restaurant. There, we talked and ate. I got to know personal things about her, including the fact that she'd been an orphan since age 20 and had been working hard to take care of herself. Catherine was an attractive lady. But after getting to know more about her, I became even more drawn to her. That night, we started our friendship. A couple of months after being so close to her, I couldn't deny my feelings anymore. I took her to her favorite restaurant and confessed my feelings to her there. I was quite surprised when she told me it was mutual. There, I proposed a relationship to her, and she agreed. I couldn't be happier. Our relationship was kept a secret at the company. I feared that they would pick on her for dating me, so we only met outside of work. For the first 2 years, no one knew. Even my dad had no idea, and I didn't tell him. I did tell my mom that I was in a relationship, but I didn't reveal who my girlfriend was. In the 3rd year, when she was 28, we finally became open. Not after I officially introduced her to my parents, though. At the introduction, my mom wasn't particularly comfortable with Catherine. She often whispered to me, asking if I was sure about Catherine, and I replied positively. "Trust me, Mom, she's a good lady. I've known her for 3 years. She loves me." It was true. I knew Catherine loved me very much. She had some bad habits, but I believed I could change her. You might be wondering what habits they were. Well, Catherine derived joy in looking down on people. She wasn't kind to beggars or poor people. She demanded money from me regularly. Of course, the money part wasn't a problem. I had enough to provide for her, but I couldn't help but be worried about her demands. I'd tried talking to her about her behaviors once, but it led to a big fight that almost ended our relationship. After we reconciled, I decided not to bring it up again. I thought I'd be able to change her without directly talking to her about it. I didn't know how I was going to make that possible, but I knew I would. After everyone at the company knew about our relationship, Catherine asked to be my personal assistant. According to her, the post she held was too low for her.
I'm your girlfriend. I shouldn't be working with those low workers. They'll only look down on me.
I thought it was absurd, but she managed to convince me, and I eventually agreed. I didn't need a personal assistant, but I had to let her be since it was what she wanted. Once she became my assistant, Catherine began abusing her power. I didn't know until the workers began reporting her to me. She was slapping workers for the slightest mistake, making them carry her bag whenever she walked in. Someone even complained about Catherine forcing them to clean her shoes in the middle of work. I couldn't take it anymore. I left my office when one of the workers came to report her for slapping him. As I reached the department where I was told she was in, I met her yelling at a worker and almost slapping him. Anger filled my body. I yelled at her and she turned to me in shock. We went to my office and I confronted her about her behavior. Since I'd caught her, she burst into tears and began apologizing. Seeing her crying hurt me, and I ended up forgiving her. A year later, Catherine and I got married. She was 29 then, and I was 32. Our wedding was the talk of the town. After the wedding, Catherine quit working for me. According to her, she wanted to be a housewife. I thought it was nice and agreed, placing her on a bi-weekly salary. Time passed, and we had our son 2 years later. We were happy. Our family was growing. Unfortunately, when my son was 3, I lost my father. It was a sad period for me. After my father's funeral, my mom fell sick and got diagnosed with dementia. I couldn't be sadder. I didn't want to keep her far from me, so I planned to bring her into my house and hire a caregiver. However, as I told my plan to Catherine, she flared up.
How can you bring a mentally deranged woman into our home? Our son is still so young. What if she attacks him? Theodore, are you not thinking?
I was so pissed hearing her call my mother a mentally deranged person. I flared up too. This is my house. You don't dictate for me in my house. My mother is moving in here whether you like it or not. Don't you ever dare use that term for her. Ever again. I stormed out, ignoring her protests. After my mom spent 2 more weeks at the hospital, I brought her into my house. Catherine nearly went crazy out of anger, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to abandon my mother. The doctor had assured me that she was harmless. I figured one caregiver wouldn't be enough, so I hired 2 and paid them handsomely. Unfortunately, both of them only stayed 2 months before they suddenly quit. I tried to convince them to stay when they refused to give me the reason for them wanting to quit, but all to no avail. I was forced to bring in a new caregiver. She managed to stay for 3 years, but left after the 3rd year. My mother wasn't improving. In fact, she seemed to be getting worse. She'd gotten so quiet and flinched whenever I tried to touch her. I'd taken her to the doctor, and he asked if I was sure about her being in safe hands. There was no bad people in my house. Catherine seemed to have changed after the 1st year my mom moved in. My son was harmless, and the caregiver that stayed 3 years didn't look bad. I decided to get another caregiver through the help of the doctor. This time around, it was a man. My mom still wasn't improving even after 2 years of his arrival. She was looking good, but she wasn't speaking and still flinched whenever I tried to touch her. I was so sad, but one day, my son suddenly came with shocking news. He was 8 years old then.
Grandma gets hit, Dad. She won't get better. They've switched her drugs. She's going to die in 6 months. Also, Dad, I'm not your son.
I was shocked and short of words. I couldn't understand what he meant, so I asked him to give me a better explanation.
I overheard Mom on the phone. She told someone I wasn't your son. Whenever you're away, Mom hits Grandma and yells at her to die. I also heard her say she switched the drugs, and the new one will kill Grandma in 6 months. I don't want Grandma to die, Dad. I also want to be your son.
I held my son close as he cried. I felt my heart shatter, not knowing what to do. How long has she been hitting Grandma?
Since Grandma moved in.
I nearly cried out from the pain that hit my chest. She'd been maltreating my mother for over 5 years. Also, there was a chance that my only child wasn't mine. I felt my whole world shatter before my eyes. I made my son promise to not let Catherine know I was aware of everything. I needed to catch her red-handed. Without her knowledge, I installed CCTV cameras in the house. She'd been against it, so I never installed any. After the installation, I got a DNA test on my son. It turned out that he truly wasn't mine. The boy I'd grown to love and cherish wasn't mine. I nearly cried my eyes out. Before confronting her, I alerted the police. I checked the CCTV footage after a week, and my heart broke when I saw how my wife treated my mother. She made her mop the house and hit her while I wasn't home. I could finally understand why she always flinched whenever I tried to touch her. She must have thought I wanted to hit her. In the now understood why all caregivers left, probably my wife was bullying them as well. I immediately forwarded the footage to the cops. Also, I retrieved the drugs, and they ended up being poisonous. I sent them to the cops too. That evening, my wife was arrested. At the court, she couldn't stop crying. She knew she was bursted. When they asked if she had a reason for all she did, She couldn't say a word. She was found guilty of all charges and sent to jail where she was to stay for 30 years. I also divorced her after the judgment. Unfortunately, I lost my mother 2 weeks later. As for my son's DNA test, I told no one about it. He was my son, and I didn't care if he wasn't my blood. I questioned Catherine about it, though. She confessed that she'd lost our child on her delivery day. I'd been out of town and couldn't be there for the birth. A nurse there had exchanged the dead child with that of another woman after Catherine paid her. She begged for forgiveness, but I simply stormed out. I tried to find the nurse, but learned that she'd passed away 2 years back. I also got to know that my son's real mother didn't know who his father was, and that she had also passed away a week after childbirth due to some complications. It was sad, but I was relieved. Of course, I told my son everything and assured him that he'd always remain my son. It's been years, and he's found the best mother figure in Evelyn. Currently, they're both away on a trip to Italy to get some things for the wedding. I heard that while in prison, Catherine tried to bully a female inmate and was beaten to a pulp, with her nose broken. She now lives in solitary confinement because of her attitude in prison and lives in constant fear. I heard she has tried to commit suicide twice and was stopped. Catherine has become a permanent past to us. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel